by saying thank you and welcome to everyone who is joining us today for this topic, which is the future of Afghanistan, challenges and prospects. We have a really interesting and very diverse panel today, and we really look forward to hearing everyone's opinions. Before we start, I would just like to say that this is the first webinar that we are doing in collaboration with Center for International Studies in Italy, and we're really thankful. They're also our collaborative partners. So we're very thankful to join us today and that they agreed to do this event with us. Hopefully we're going to see a lot more collaborations and a lot more work that we can do together in the future. Before I hand it over to our moderator today, I would just like to give his introduction. So our moderator today is Gabrielle Yakube, director at C.E.Z.I, which is the Center for International Studies in Italy. He entered the institute in 2010 as an analyst of Middle East and North Africa and became the coordinator of all the analysis wing of the institute in 2013. His fields of analysis include geopolitics and security in North Africa and Middle East, jihadi terrorism, and de-radicalization and global issues. He visits the broader Middle East region, China, and US on a regular basis. He holds a master's in international relations and a degree in political science, both obtained at the LUISS University of Rome, and a master's in peacekeeping and security studies from the University of Rome. He worked as a political advisor with NATO's Rapid Deployable Force and as a teaching assistant in the history of international relations at LUISS. He is lecturer at Scuola Ufficiali Carabinieri. He is I apologize if I said that wrong. He is the coordinator of SSAFE course for the FAO staff, and Mr. Yakubino has been frequently interviewed as commentator on national and international TV and radio broadcasts. So Gabrielle, over to you, please.
Thank you, Zunaira. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your perfect Italian pronunciation. Thank you also for your patience because we had in the last few weeks to reschedule this meeting, and thank you for your support. And I would like also to thank Mr. Ambassador Riaz for his support, for his collaboration when he was ambassador here in Italy, but also in his role as president of the Institute of Regional Studies in Islamabad. We hope this could be the first of many occasions of collaboration between the two of our institute. Today we will speak about what will be the challenges and the opportunity also coming from the stabilization of Afghanistan. Of course, a new kind of stabilization than the last 20 years, because we should start to speak not anymore just about security in Afghanistan, but also to increase the support of the international community and of the regional actors to support the development, both economical speaking, but also social speaking, of this country that remain an important strategic junction for the regional stabilities, but also for the international stability. Today, we will speak about this issue with some guests, starting from Miss DEEDA SHAKEB AZAMI. She's an educationist, women rights activist, and emerging civil society leader, alumni from Badashkan province. She has a master's degree in education from Karlstad University, Sweden. She has been part of many educational awareness raising programs. DEEDA founded a Call of Kindness initiative back in 2015. Under this initiative, she established a library for girls in Faizabad. She has been providing clothes and stationery to women and children since then. She is an advocate for peace and gender equality in Afghanistan, and currently she is volunteering for women political participation and their presence in peace talks. Her journey to leadership started several years ago. She believes that she is fortunate to have a family who supported her to fulfill her dreams, and she decided to advocate for those women who need the support. AZAMI is part of a network of aspiring leaders from across the country, supported by USAID. She has worked in many national international organizations, and she has experience of working in leadership position in the government as well. As an Afghanistan educated girl and member of women networks such as Musharikat, she's equipped with leadership characteristics. She's an IVLP 2019 alumna. The inspiring life story of AZAMI is a result of various programs that have been implemented in the last 18 years of capacity building and social and economic change in Afghanistan. Programs that might not have been heard of, but their outcomes are as great as the presence of well-informed generation of Afghan citizens with great ideas and vision of Afghanistan. Another speaker of today is Francesca Manenti, our senior analyst for C.E.Z.I, Center for International Studies, in charge for Asia and Pacific Affairs. Her field of analysis include political, security, and geoeconomic dynamic in China, Iran, Southeast Asia, and East Asia. She's an author of publication of subject of her expertise and the coordinator of C.E.Z.I's project with Asian think tanks and research institute. She joined our institute in 2013. Ms. Manenti has field research experience in several Asian countries, first of all, of course, Pakistan, but also Iran, Afghanistan, India, Vietnam, and China, where she traveled both for attending international conference and for meeting with foreign institutions and institute. Another speaking of today will be Mr. Dilawar Khan. He belongs to federally administrated tribal areas of Pakistan. Mr. Khan has over 13 years of experience with international organization with a passion for social development. He founded Code Pakistan in May 2014. During his professional career, he served the United Nations International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in The Hague, the International Committee of the Red Cross, and also served as senior advisor to the US Ambassador in Pakistan. Mr. Khan holds a Master of Philosophy degree from the National Defense University of Islamabad and is currently a doctoral candidate in Peace and Conflict Studies at the Center of International Peace and Stability, National University of Science and Technology of Pakistan. Last but not least is Pierluigi Barberini, our analyst in charge for Defense and Security Desk. He graduated with honors in political science from Lewis University here in Rome. During his bachelor degree, he spent a semester abroad studying at the University of Herzliya in Israel. He then graduated with honors and special mention in a master's degree in international relation, major in global studies, again from the Lewis University. During his master's degree program, he attended a summer school organized by the same university and the Italian Army for a 2-week period, getting engaged in NATO K4 mission in Kosovo. He has also been an intern in our institute as a geopolitical desk. At the moment, he's enrolled in a second-level master's degree in Homeland Security. So after this presentation, I'm glad to give the floor to Ambassador Riyadh for his welcome remark. Please, Ambassador, the floor is yours. Ambassador, sorry, the microphone.
Good morning, everyone, and it's such a pleasure seeing the team at C.E.Z.I. You know, I cherish the moments I was there, and we used to have all these discussions. Well, now we are going to get into this as we have got into this collaborative arrangement. So I'm sure we will be doing a number of events. My congratulations to Professor Marjaledi for making this collaboration possible. And I'm sure, I can go on and on, but I would like people to hear about Afghanistan. So over to you, Gabrielle, and welcome to all the participants. I'm really looking forward to listening to the view of experts on the situation in Afghanistan, which can best be termed as complex. Thank you, and over to you, Gabrielle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Before starting our discussion, I remember all the participants of today's meeting that we will have a Q&A section after all the speeches. You can use the chat toolbox to write down your question, or you can also raise your answer to intervene in our discussion. So we would like to start today's discussion by a reflection of course, the NATO mission in Afghanistan. Today is the day after the NATO meeting in Brussels. Of course, the alliance is changing its approach toward Afghanistan. If there will be a new approach toward Afghanistan, will be, of course, a new and a prospectical approach. So on this premise, I will give the floor to Pierluigi. Please, Pierluigi.
Thank you, Gabriele, and thank you all for inviting me today to this webinar. I'm glad to be here with you and to discuss with you the future prospects of Afghanistan. Of course, from my perspective, that is more a defense, a security perspective, I will now briefly talk about NATO in Afghanistan, which of course has played a major role over the past 20 years. So we're trying to focus not so much on the past of NATO in Afghanistan, but more on the present and future, possible future for NATO in the country. For the past, I would like just to mention that the NATO involvement in Afghanistan has been probably one of the longest, biggest, most complex, and most challenging mission in the history of the Atlantic Alliance. The NATO involvement in Afghanistan started in 2001 with the ISAF mission, the International Security Assistance Force, which actually at the beginning was not under NATO leadership when it was established, but was under national leadership of the member states participating in the mission. NATO assumed the leadership of the operation in 2003, and in the same year, the mandate of the coalition by the United Nations was also extended, as we know, because the beginning was just based on Kabul, the capital, and the surrounding area, and from that moment onward, NATO assumed the responsibility of providing security to the whole country. And just to mention that the maximum presence of NATO troops in Afghanistan was reached between 2011 and 2012, with approximately 30,000 international troops present at that moment in the country. That is why it was one of the most complex, most important, and most challenging operation ever undertaken by NATO. There were 130,000 troops coming from 51 countries, both NATO member states and NATO partners. And then, as we know, in 2015, there was the new mission, that is the Resolute Support Mission, still ongoing, that is a smaller non-combat operation focused on training, advising, and assisting the Afghanistan National Security Forces. What's the current state of NATO mission in Afghanistan? As we know, NATO troops and US troops are going back home from Afghanistan after 20 years of mission. And according actually to US sources, the withdrawal process is actually half complete, at least on the side of the United States. As we know, Biden at the end of April announced the definitive withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan. At the beginning of this year, at the beginning of 2020, there were more or less 10,000 troops from NATO member states and NATO countries, in total coming from 36 nations. Of these 10,000 troops, the majority were US troops, more or less 2,500, and then we had the second contributor, that is Germany, with more or less 1,300 troops, and then Italy, the third contributor, with approximately 900 troops. As we know, these troops are coming back from Afghanistan, and the withdrawal process is currently in process, is currently ongoing. And I would like to say that this process is quite complex, not only from an organizational and security perspective, but also from a logistic perspective. As we know, Afghanistan is a landlocked state. The domestic railway system, it's not so effective. So the withdrawal process has to take place mainly by air, that is air strategic transportation from Afghanistan towards the home country, the final destination, or the second modality is a multidimensional transportation, first by air to a base in the United Arab Emirates, and then by ship to the final destination. That is a very complex process. However, it is ongoing, and according actually to US sources, it could be completed by the month of July. So actually some weeks before the date that we all know, that is September 11. And a last remark on this fact, actually troops will be the last to leave the country. At the moment, the focus of the withdrawal process is about equipment, military equipment, gadgetry, armaments like air assets, ground assets. Troops will be the last to leave the country because they have to guarantee force protection during this delicate phase. Actually, at the beginning of the withdrawal process, the US increased the number of troops present in Afghanistan on a temporary basis, just to guarantee the security of troops. But now, what could be the future role of NATO for Afghanistan? In this sense, as Gabriele said, yesterday there was the NATO summit, and there were some very clear messages about the possible future posture of NATO for Afghanistan. And this role by NATO could be based on four main dimensions, let's say. The first one is that NATO will continue to support Afghan national security forces from a financial perspective through the Afghan National Army Trust Fund that was established actually in 2007. And since that moment, this fund has provided more or less 3.4 billion euros until now to Afghan national security forces. But the core of the funding actually comes from the US alone. The US has a separate fund to finance Afghan national security forces, that is the United States Afghanistan Security Forces Fund. And in this sense, recently the US committed to devote $3.33 billion annually to the Afghan security forces for the next 2 years at least. And so the economic support by the US and in general by NATO countries and partner countries is a crucial aspect in order to guarantee the operational capability of Afghan national security forces, since they are almost completely dependent on foreign financing. The second aspect that NATO is focusing on in order to support Afghanistan is the possible out-of-country training of troops. That is, not training anymore Afghan troops on local soil as they did until now, but training especially special forces, Afghan special forces, and also members of the Air Force outside the country. Some possible locations could be some countries in Europe in order to carry out such an operation. On the one hand, it makes sense, especially if it is to train Afghan special forces. As we know, special forces are in small numbers. So it's possible to train small groups of special operators outside the home country. On the other hand, it is quite complex to carry out such a training and advising mission, and it could be not as effective, of course, as training such operators locally. However, it's important to maintain support from the side of NATO to the special forces and to the Afghan Air Force, since they are the two components of the security forces of Afghanistan, which are better equipped to counter the insurgency in the country. The third aspect is that NATO will continue to support Afghanistan from the civilian perspective through the civilian capacity building assistance and through the NATO senior civil representative in Afghanistan. And the fourth and last aspect is the protection of critical infrastructures in the country, especially of the airport, the Kabul airport. That, as we know, it's a critical infrastructure, a strategic infrastructure in order to get in and out of the country. And in this sense, the role played by the US and Turkey will be important, because at the moment, the Kabul airport is secured by Turkish troops, and still it is not clear whether Turkish troops will leave as well or not, and in case they leave, who will assume responsibility for securing the airport. Also, the US are trying to understand how many troops will maintain in Afghanistan just for guaranteeing the security of the embassy and of the airport, since US diplomatic personnel has to be secured also on the way from the airport to the embassy and on the way back. So these are the two major infrastructures that the US want to continue to preserve to guarantee security of in the country, and NATO could play also an important role as well in continuing to provide security for at least for the Kabul airport in the future. And thank you, and I close my remark.
Thank you, Pierluigi. So there will be, there are challenges also for NATO, both from the logistic point of view, but of course, especially from the political point of view, to understand how to support Afghanistan to head the future challenges. However, as we said before, the support to Afghanistan could be not just from the security perspective, but especially from the social and economic perspective, and maybe no one as Afghan people could support this process. From this perspective, also the role of women in the Afghan society will be a crucial point, and on this point, I'm glad to give the floor to Ms. AZAMI for some remarks on the role of women in the Afghan society. Please, Madam.
Hello, everyone. Am I audible?
Okay. Yes, we can hear you.
At first, I would like to thank Ms. Zainora for providing this platform for me to talk, and also Mr. Gabriel for the introduction. Well, speaking about the Afghan women and their fate, well, as the US reduces its military presence in Afghanistan, and while Taliban still remains strong in the battlefield, especially these days with if you go through the news, there are an increase in a significant increase in the presence of Taliban and their attacks in different parts of Afghanistan. So you could see a massive question mark over the fate of or future of Afghan women and their rights. Although I would like to, as an Afghan woman, I would like to be really optimistic over the change that we had over the last 18 to 20 years. But then if you're living in Afghanistan, or you go through the news about Afghanistan, you could see that these reduction of military, as earlier our friend talked about NATO's withdrawal from Afghanistan, and even US withdrawal from Afghanistan. You could see that there are strong reasons for women, especially women living in urban areas from middle class to upper, to see their situation is getting worse. Although there are women representing Afghan women in the peace talks, but as we see, there are still women who are not, the talks were still like in a pause mode. We don't know if the Istanbul talks will happen. The Doha talks remains in a pause mode, that we don't know what will happen. Unfortunately, though the international community, the United States talked about women's rights, and a lot of women in the past 18 years gained a lot. As you have also talked about my bio, that in the past 18 years, being part of many and various programs nationally and internationally, I got the opportunity to sit here and talk in front of you guys. So now when you see the past 18 years and right this moment, like post-May 2021, you could see that a lot of women are afraid of their future, especially in urban areas. Women in rural areas in Afghanistan, they are hardly talking about it, and all they want is peace, actually absence of war. But when it comes to women in the urban areas, for them, it's not absence of peace, but they want justice, they want their rights to be protected, they want to go to schools, they want to go to work, they want to be part of this community or Afghanistan, like men. But unfortunately, if you go through whatever happened in Afghanistan in the past, before 2001, you could see that women were not allowed to go to school, go to work, and all. And thinking about giving the opportunity or the platform to Taliban again to talk, to be on the leadership position, it kind of discourages women. Although there are some talks about, like, a lot of women who are giving the tiniest opportunity, they are going to talk about their rights, and with the international communities, with the embassies, with the neighboring countries, with women, youth, and other relevant stakeholders to discuss their rights and discuss or share their concerns. But I don't think it is enough for now. As we talk for now, at this moment, we have 3 to 5 women who are part of the peace negotiations. We have Ms. Kofi, we have Ms. Sarabi, we have Ms. Gilani, who are really active women, and they have been part of the political and social and the politics and social structure of Afghanistan in the past 18 years. For me, as an Afghan woman, I am really happy that they are there. They are voicing their opinions. They are talking about how unfair Taliban were pre-2001 to Afghan women by not letting them to go to schools or be or live as a normal human being. But still, I believe that's not enough, because if you go through whatever the deal happened between US and the Taliban about Afghanistan, we didn't see anything mentioned on women's rule, how their rights and their rule will be perceived even when the US leaves. So this is quite frustrating for Afghan women who live their life in Afghanistan, who are planning to not leave the country, because this is our country, this is our life, and not everyone can leave the country to go for the sake of themselves. But if you're talking about whole Afghanistan, so I believe in this, if there is a peace deal between Afghanistan, Afghan government and the Taliban, and if there is unfortunately a bad peace deal where women's inclusion is not talked about or not being discussed, then it will be a probably worse situation than we had it in 90s. If you talk about statistic, before 2001, there was no single woman who worked for government in the Taliban leadership. But then post that, between 16 to 27% after 2001, 16 to 27% of women got the opportunity to work for government. A lot of organizations, including USAID, that I am part of various programs that, including Musharakat as well. I was part of it. The countries, if it is Australia who closed their embassy, it's US who is encouraging its staff or people or citizens to leave Afghanistan, or the EU, European Union, and other German embassy in Afghanistan. Everyone is talking about their reduction of their staff in the country. So this situation, or thinking about the situation, even the Taliban are saying that we don't have anything with civil society activists, we don't have anything with those translators or workers who work for international community in Afghanistan. We don't have anything with them. But if you go through the news and if you see them, at the moment, all they are doing is not only the Taliban, but even the Afghan government, while they are in the fights between them, a lot of civilians are losing their lives. And most of them are civil society activists. We have women. Unfortunately, end of 2020 and first half of 2021 was the worst year for journalists, especially for women journalists. So with this situation, or looking at this scenario, you could see that, okay, the situation is not getting better. And all the hope for now is, at least from a woman's perspective who is living in Afghanistan, is for the UN and international community, regional countries, including Pakistan, Iran, and all these countries who have influence in the politics of Afghanistan and the future of Afghanistan, to bring women's issue on the table. When we cannot only talk about women's representation with 3 to 5 women on the board, when United States itself didn't even mention once women's rights when they had a deal with the Taliban, or when there is discussions on peace, it's always the warlords or only those politicians who has the influence, but not women of Afghanistan or youth of Afghanistan. So I think if the situation goes like this, it is really sad for me to talk about this like this, because I'm always this positive person to talk that, okay, this might work better. This might be a good for Afghanistan. Probably if Taliban and government, they come together, the situation will get better. We will get rid of 40 years of war and the civil war that we had even before Taliban came. Although I have all those feelings within me, but still it is quite discouraging to see international communities not talking about it. US has left, NATO is leaving. By September, they all will go. We know that their stay wasn't for forever. We all, not only women, but all Afghans thought that they came on 2001 and eventually they will leave. They won't stay here forever. But not talking about the achievements that we had over the past 18 years, talking about youth role, not talking about women's presence, not talking about those women who lost their men, like the family members in the war, and now they are great owners. So what if the Taliban comes and they are not allowed to go to work again? What will happen to them? So it is really important for international community, for UN, for United States that always talks about women's rights to discuss this. That before they are leaving, at least they should consider that women in Afghanistan are not left behind just the way they were in 90s when the Taliban was here. And also when we are talking about the presence of women, I believe it's not. I mean, it's okay if I tell them this, but I'm sure that you all know that we don't have a woman representative from Taliban side. It's like all men. There is not a single woman to talk about what happened to women on the other side, what happened to Taliban's women, when they lost their loved ones? What happens to women in the rural areas when their sons or husbands or other family members went to the war? So it's always that the preaching thing that we talked about women's rights, but unfortunately, when it comes to practice what we preach, everything seems that it's on the paper. Unfortunately, even for now, when we are talking about US and Taliban deal, there is nothing about women's role on the paper as well. So this should be considered, I believe. I think if I talk about it more, then the thing will come that, okay, I am an Afghan woman and I have to really like resist this idea that women should be part of everything. But I bet you all would agree on this thing, that the Afghan women struggle a lot. And the last 18 years that we have to work really hard. We went to school, we went to university, we went out of country to study and came back to our countries to serve. And with the Taliban coming back to the leadership or coming back to the power, we might lose the chance to work for the country that we have came back to. On this note, I would like to finish my speech, and if there is any question, I would like to answer that probably by the end of the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. AZAMI, to share with us your thought. I think you touched so many important issues that it's quite impossible to summarize everything. However, I would like to underline a sort of feeling from a Westerner perspective that is like we also, as Italian, we have a long-standing history of presence in Afghanistan as a NATO allied, so a presence of support and fighting also in Afghanistan, but the feeling at the very end in these days of withdrawing of the NATO mission from Afghanistan is like to have spent almost 20 years, and the results are however long way to be the real result that we expected at the very end of the mission. Yes, we tried to fight against the race of Al-Qaeda, but without maybe we did not succeed to have a more stabilized perspective for the Afghan people. And however, I will kindly ask you to keep your positive perspective, and maybe from our side we can what we can say you it's we at your total disposal to support you to raise the point and the point of view of women, Afghan women, also in the Western society. On this path, I will give the floor to Francesca Manenti, our senior analyst for Asian desk, to keep going the discussion on the human perspective of stabilization of Afghanistan and the human development, the importance of human development for the stabilization of Afghanistan. Please, Francesca.
Thank you very much for this occasion, for sharing some views on how the situation in Afghanistan could evolve or evolve after the evolution of the agreement that we are all looking at for understanding in which direction these developments will go. My remarks today will focus, as Director said, on the human development side, just for assessing a few points that we as Italian observers look at the Afghanistan situation and what are the pillars or the factors that impress us the most and we suggest to take into consideration for analyzing analyzing the future development of the situation. Italy is part of NATO. It has been one of the crucial countries in this year in participating to NATO missions. So we must underline that effectively there has been some step forward comparing to the situation in 2001 concerning what was the general framework and the conditions that people in the 1990s was experiencing under the Islamic Emirates of Taliban, as just Ms. AZAMI recorded. However, even if these steps forwards have been done, we have also must consider that the question marks opened by in these last few years are still really relevant and give us a picture of Afghanistan that is not so positive that we can think about. And also with this agreement going on, we need to consider these factors in order to think about and to take into consideration how structure a sustainable future for the Afghanistan, not in the short term, but in the mid and long term. So for this reason, I would like to introduce some statistics, some data that is a UN data for showing you how much the problem is real nowadays. The UNDP has this Human Development Index that is more or less an average measure of the basic human development achievement in a country. And according to the data released in 2019, Afghanistan is still in the very low line of countries comparing the human development indexes, without also without taking numbers, because numbers per se are not very important. The most important fact is that with all these years that has been gone since the international community went in Afghanistan, the Human Development Index is still very low for Afghanistan. Does it mean that effectively there has been some improvement? If we see, for example, life expectancy at birth, we saw that there has been an increase at about 20 years or 15 years in this life expectancy, or that the years of schooling are actually increased in the last 20 years. However, the Human Development Index is not at all, for Afghanistan, is not at all among the other countries in South Asia. And this is very important if we think on how or on which basis we are going to shape our relations with Afghanistan in the future after such a crucial moment where the one we are living and Afghan people are living through. Moreover, we have to take into consideration that when we speak about human development, and in the case of UNDP, the Human Development Index, we have to take into account that this kind of index often masks the inequality of distribution, meaning that it's true there has been some improvement, but how many people was able to join and to perceive the effects of this improvement. For Afghanistan, the inequalities are still very alarming, especially if you take into consideration the gender issues. And I'm really glad to have heard the speech of Ms. AZAMI before mine, because it was really enlightening for me and for those people who are trying to study and trying to understand how the gender perspective must come into the global picture when we speak or when we try to figure out a solution, a long-term sustainability solution for the country. So speaking about the gender inequality in Afghanistan is still really high. When we speak about gender inequality, we are speaking about something that reflects how there are still a gap or differences in women and men access to important dimension for everyday life, like health, like empowerment, meaning how many women can effectively access political positions or the political making decision position inside their countries, or also the can obtain a second or higher education degree in their country. So how can really access the educational system in their country? And third, the economic activity. So how much women can access the labor market, and which is the participation rate for women and for men inside the country. Well, from this perspective, Afghanistan has a long way still to go through in order to create the condition on which Afghan people, Afghan governments, with the support of international communities, can indeed build something that can be considered, a future for the country. This is very important, and I would like also to connect with what Director Yakubino said in the opening remarks. We are speaking about the future of Afghanistan. We have been used to speak about Afghanistan from a security perspective, especially from a traditional security perspective, meaning a police security, a military security, and hard national security. Of course, these are important dimensions if we want to have a stable Afghanistan for the future. But when we speak about a sustainable future for us, Afghanistan, we need also to take into consideration the so-called non-traditional security dimension. And this is very, very much entangled with human development, because human security, or without human security, we can't think to have a secure future for Afghanistan, a secure future for the population and the government of Afghanistan. What does I mean when I speak about human security? I'm totally aware that we can discuss per hours about the human security definition, because there is not at all a widely accepted human security definition. But once again, come back to UN and to what UN define, or how would UN define human security? It is just an approach that suggests international community experts, governments, politicians, stakeholders, practitioners, everybody is involved and engaged in building or in trying to shape the future of situations all over the world, to take into consideration the people as the center of their approach. So human security is an approach that have livelihood, that have the gender bias, that have all these dimensions included and inside, in order to shape policy decisions and policy papers, or policy making processes that have really the population and the people at the very core. Where are now? This is the problem. I mean, and I again linking to what just Ms. AZAMI said. This is the picture that we can see if we look at Afghanistan, but nowadays the process that is ongoing raise a lot of question marks that are indeed very, very entangled and tackled with the uncertainties that the Doha Agreement raised in 2020, and the balances of different powers that are going on and that are shaping the situation right now. Just for giving a few food for thoughts, and then I will close my remarks for not taking too much time. We will have to consider which is the future of the political environment in Afghanistan. We have seen in these years that the Afghan political environment is very much divided and is characterized by very specific and very peculiar dynamics in the intra-Afghan dialogues. And this inevitably reflects on the unity that the Afghan political class could show in their relations or in their dialogue process with Afghanistan. And these are affecting effectively the balance of power and the possibility for Kabul and the other political parties, political powers or stakeholders to shape their dialogue with the Taliban. The other point from the political perspective is what Ms. AZAMI just spoke about. I mean, Taliban probably will be back from the front door or from the window, but they will probably be back in few months or in few years. So then what? Which are the institutional and political results of this process? The human development, how is considered in all this process? Which are the, the factors that Taliban or a government with inside Taliban will like to keep from these 20 years past since 2001, and which are the factors that they are not anymore part of the total equation. This will be very important question mark to have an answer before ending the process, and hopefully before the international community will leave Afghanistan. The other question mark is of course the security. We have seen since 2000 to 2020 that it has been probably the worst year from a security perspective for Afghanistan. Taliban is back on track. Also from an insurgency point of view, there are some internal disputes also for Afghanistan. There are uncertainties also for the link between Afghanistan and Al-Qaeda and et cetera, and all this picture is of course shaping the possibility for Afghan people and Afghan governments to really work on human development. And it's a problem that we all must take into consideration, especially if we consider that in September, international troops will actually leave. The international communities will have to shape a new ways for interacting with Afghanistan, and Afghanistan will become actually, the Afghan government probably will become actually the ruler of the future of the Afghanistan. And so it will be very important to understand how the new Afghanistan will be part of the bigger picture of the security, political and development situation in the broader South Asia. Without all this consideration, it will be very difficult to think about a long-term sustainable future for the country. I would like to stop here. And if then there is any question, I will be glad to answer.
Thank you, Francesca. Again, the human factor and human perspective is crucial for the stabilization of the country and of the region. But before to going more in deep on this issue on the human factor, giving the floor to Mr. Khan, I will ask to our participant if any one of you has any question or remark on Ms. AZAMI speech, because she should leave for another meeting. If anyone has any question, they could put on the table right now, or however Ms. AZAMI should leave.
Hello.
Yes, please.
I'm audible, please.
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you, but maybe we cannot see you, but we can hear you. Not anymore. Okay, so if there are no question, we can thanks Ms. AZAMI for her participation and go ahead with our discussion. Please, Mr. Khan, thank you for your patience. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for organizing, and I endorse my colleagues, the former speakers who mentioned different dimensions. So they are based on facts, and I would endorse most of them. Now, coming to my topic, repatriation of Afghan refugees from Pakistan. To set the stage, most of the participants of this panel and the participants would know that Pakistan is not signatory to the Refugee Convention, nor to the 51 Convention, or to the additional protocol of 67, nor Pakistan has a domestic legal legislation to manage the Afghan refugees in Pakistan. So now this is, as a lawyer, this is a huge challenge when it comes to a country which still remains the top country in the most protracted refugee crisis in the world, and was hosting a few years ago the largest population of the refugee population in the world. So that's the status where we are. Of course, with all these legal challenges, there are issues and there are concerns, but Pakistan, for the last almost 4 decades, have very bravely faced all these challenges, and the Afghan refugees have been provided with an opportunity to stay on the soil of Pakistan. Now, speaking of the repatriation, the figures are not very promising because repatriation under many international agreements between Pakistan, Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, and UNHCR, repatriation remains the topmost or preferred option for the government of Pakistan. So the continued repatriation is taking place, but the numbers are coming low and down. Since 2017, 59,020 refugees repatriated. If compared to 2020, it's only 1,125. So the numbers have decreased. There could be many reasons, and especially if we speak of the last quarter of 2021, something around 516 people have repatriated against the hopes of UNHCR that during this year around 58,000 individuals are expected to return. But with this very slow, but the first quarter, because of the winter suspension of repatriation, the numbers could be slow. Another reason is COVID pandemic. That could be another reason that the repatriation is slow. But what my friends earlier submitted in their discussion, that there are many push and pull factors. So some of the factors that stop the Afghan refugees from repatriating, of course, security, livelihood are some of the key reasons of not repatriating at this stage. Now, what is happening in Pakistan in terms of the management of the Afghan refugees? In 2017, the cabinet, the Pakistan Federal Cabinet agreed on 5-point agenda to facilitate a better management mechanism for the Afghan refugees. One was the continued voluntary repatriation, so that it remains voluntary, and the government of Pakistan and Afghanistan makes an enabling environment where repatriation remains a preferred option. And then the extension of the proof of registration cards, which now is replaced with smart cards with a 2 years extension, which is again a very reassuring step, so that the POR cards were renewed for months, but now with a smart card, it's more information and more authenticity is provided to the POR card holders, which from protection perspective means more protection and less harassment by the authorities, by the local authorities, if they happen to have an expired POR card. So this issue has also been addressed. Registration of the undocumented Afghans also remained a top priority, and around 0.8 million Afghan refugees have been registered in consultation with the Afghan government, but now the Afghan government under the agreement was expected to provide passports so that their re-entry to Pakistan is legal under a flexible visa regime, which government of Pakistan in October 2021 has the flexible visa regime is in place. So that's another angle of the management of the Afghan refugees in Pakistan. However, things, as I said, are not easy for Afghans and for the Pakistani officials and the Afghanistan government, to keep the numbers higher because there could be no pressure on the Afghans already living in Pakistan. And if I go on the numbers, with 1.4 million living in Pakistan, 69% of this population lives in urban centers. So they are no more in refugee villages. So it's very difficult to reach out to them and identify where they are. 31% only remains in the refugee villages. And of this population, 54% are male and 46% are female and 43% are children. Now, with these numbers, which are only registered 1.4 and then 0.8 million who have been issued the Afghan citizen cards, so the numbers are 2 million registered. And if we look at the repatriation trend, the numbers are not as they were expected, both by UNHCR and the government of Pakistan and Afghanistan. Now, what could be some of the reasons for repatriation if some of the people that are moving? So one of the key reasons is the UNHCR assistance which is provided to the Afghan families, the returnees. So that's one reason that the Afghan nationals or the refugees would like to return. The second is reunion with the families. The third is the land allocation, which remains one of the top priorities for the people going back to Afghanistan, so that they have some mechanism where they can claim a land and shelter. And some consider that there are better employment opportunities in Afghanistan. But some of the push factors are high cost of living, rent, lack of employment opportunities. COVID also played a role in making it as a push factor, denial of access to basic services, fear of arrest and deportation, and more strict administrative arrangements in place now. Now, having the push and the pull factors, I'll quickly come to then what motivates the Afghan refugees to stay in Pakistan despite the mentioned push factors. This is the fourth generation of the Afghan refugees living in Pakistan, and 3 generations absolutely, at least those that I have been, that I interviewed or I met during all these years, they cannot associate themselves with Afghanistan. They're born here, they have lived here for all their life, but they don't have anything more than the proof of registration card. So that keeps them close to Pakistan. Then the perceived insecurity in Afghanistan is another reason that even after 20 years of the world's one of the most protected wars, still they are not sure whether the Afghanistan would be a safe country. Withdrawal of US forces after September 2021, that's another reason. Lack of income opportunities in Afghanistan and family relations in Pakistan. Now, I'll quickly touch as a last point that the discussion or the definition of an illegal migrant or a refugee in Pakistan, it is technically very difficult, because when the first wave of the Afghan refugees came in 1978-79, it was a mass exodus. So it was a prima facie status of the refugees that the government of Pakistan accepted them as the refugees. And then until 2007, so between 78 and 2007, there was no mechanism where they were registered. So there was a very long period where they remained undocumented. And even after 2007 till 2017, again, another 10 years where the government started a process of documented the undocumented Afghans. But living in Pakistan, I can say that the numbers are higher. Now, how much higher, nobody has the exact figure, but if we go with the government position, so 1.4 million POR and 0.8 ACC, so it's we are talking of 2 million Afghan refugees. Now, what makes it feasible for the Afghans and the Pakistanis to opt for illegal migration to countries like Greece, Italy, via Turkey? So the reports by UNODC and ICPMD, which is International Center for Migration Policy Development, between 300,000 to 500,000 Pakistanis travel abroad using irregular means. So these are the numbers from the upper Potohar region to some southern parts of the Punjab province. IOM report of 2019 also suggests that the most common smuggling route in Pakistan is well-documented land route to Europe. This is often referred to the Eastern Mediterranean route and is predominantly used by Pakistani, Afghan, and Bangladeshi nationals. So it is already a documented fact that irregular or illegal migration is taking place. Will it increase in future? Yes, with more strict measures in Pakistan, with over 50,000 Pakistanis alone coming back from UAE because they lost their jobs because of pandemic. So there will be a more shrunk market here in Pakistan with more strict administrative measures, with less possibilities of repatriation to Afghanistan, with less and less numbers offered by the international organizations such as the UNHCR, an option for third country settlement. And some of you may know that since 2017, UNHCR has not entertained the third country settlement, and only emergency cases, and that too of the non-Afghans, are being handled. So these are some of the challenges that the avenues that they had for legal migration are becoming more and more bleak. So, and then if there is a network, which the numbers are suggesting that there are routes that allow them both by road and by air and by sea, that takes them to different parts of the world, especially Europe. So my analysis that they will certainly be using those opportunities because the grass is greener on the other side. So for the better livelihood, for opportunities. And then Afghans, in all these 40 years, the Afghan nationals are living in different countries. So there is a family, there are families that they can relocate to. For the readmission, Pakistan and Afghanistan, they don't have any agreement like Europe. So that is not an option at the moment. However, in the present circumstances, even if one thinks of anything similar to Europe, would be very tricky to handle, because there would be confusion of being a refugee or an extended refugee living for many years, or an illegal migrant. So that readmission theory cannot be applicable at this stage when it comes to Afghanistan and Pakistan, because any forced returns through a state mechanism may be construed as non-refoulement and would be categorized as forced repatriation. So the topic is interesting, it's big, there are many challenges, there are many issues concerning the topic, but with the given time, I thought that few figures and the situation on ground may give you certain clarity on where we are. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much to you, Mr. Khan. I agree with you. The topic is, of course, bigger than 10 minutes. However, we hope to have occasion to come back on this issue. As we said before, the regional dimension is a strategic dimension for the stabilization of Afghanistan, and of course, in this dimension, Pakistan has a global role, both on the political side, but also on the human side. And these issues of refugees and, however, migrants is always a difficult issues, and no one, as we Italian today with the migrant issues in the Mediterranean Sea, we can understand. Now we have some minutes for the Q&A session. I saw before in the chat toolbox a remark about the NATO meeting of yesterday about the responsibility, yes, on Afghan airport, and yes, also on the role of Russia and China in the coming month in Afghanistan. Maybe we can start from the Afghan from the airport for the Turkey responsibility on the airport in Afghanistan. Maybe Pierluigi, you can add something more.
Yes, thank you, Gabriele, and thank you for this remark. I took the occasion of the remark in the chat to argue a little bit more about the issue of the airport. As I said before, the Kabul airport in Afghanistan is very important for the country and for foreign diplomatic missions in Afghanistan, as well as it is one of the main way in and out for Afghanistan and for the diplomatic personnel deployed in Kabul. And NATO committed to protect critical infrastructure in the country, especially the Kabul airport, and the Kabul airport at the moment is under protection by Turkish troops. There was this bilateral meeting between President Erdogan and President Biden ahead of the summit yesterday, where they talk, of course, they discussed several issues, including Afghanistan. Actually, before the meeting, the yesterday meeting, there were already some bilateral meetings between the US and Turkey on the possible solutions in order to continue to guarantee the security and protection of the Kabul airport. Turkey already said that it could remain with its troop in the country, and so to continue to safeguard the Kabul airport under some circumstances, that is, under some logistic and financial support provided mainly we can say by the United States. And yesterday they further discussed about this possibility. And we also have to consider that in recent times, relationships between Turkey and the US on the one hand and the NATO allies on the other end were not so easy. So this could be a move for Turkey in order to try to somehow to put relationships between Ankara, the United States, Washington, and several NATO countries on the right track again, since also it's the most preferable solution for Turkish troops to remain there. They are already there. So from the logistic and operational aspect would be the best solution for Turkish troops just to stay there and to continue to provide security for the airport. Also on the side of the United States, it would mean that the US will have to leave less troops in the country in Afghanistan, since the airport will be under Turkish responsibility, and they will just have to focus more on the embassy and securing their own embassy. So this is quite an important issue. We will see if a final and official decision will be made, or whether Turkey has committed to continue to keep its troops in Afghanistan in order to protect the airport. The United States could see this as a good solution. So we will see what actually will happen in the coming weeks for this very crucial and important point. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierluigi. I saw a raised hand before, but maybe we can keep reading. Okay. Before to go back to the question, there is a raised hand. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Imran. I'm a research analyst from the Institute of Regional Studies. So my question is to, I think, Mr. Dilawar Khan. It has really surprised me that there is no agreement between Pakistan and Afghanistan over the refugees. And also Pakistan does not have any legislation regarding the management of the foreseeable influx of Afghans in the post-US withdrawal. So, Mr. Khan, what is the reason that government of Pakistan is not taking this seriously and not coming up with legislation? So, what do you say?
Mr. Khan.
Brown, thank you very much. It is surprising for many people, and when I was studying this, so as a law student, I also was surprised that since the refugee situation is 1978, if Pakistan is not signatory to the International Refugee Convention and the protocol, there could be other foreign affairs concerns. I would not comment on that. But as a lawyer, I would highly recommend, and I have done that in my capacity on multiple occasions, that there has to be a national refugee legislation, at least so that both sides, not only the Afghans feel that the refugees in general feel protected, but the government of Pakistan also has a mechanism to better manage all the refugees, not only Afghans, but the other refugees living in Pakistan. So what is the reason? I cannot comment on that since I'm not the government, but recently with many people, individuals and institution efforts, in 2017, the federal cabinet approved the 5-point agenda, and one of the points was the adoption of the national refugee legislation. 4 years have passed since 2017. There is no proposal for the national for the adoption of the national refugee legislation. When we speak of the agreements between Afghanistan and Pakistan, the most recent one, if I can, it was a long acronym, but I can share it with you, that one of the most recent ones. So we are doing good with the trade. So we have agreements with trade and others. But there was this Afghanistan-Pakistan Action Plan for Peace and Solidarity. So there were 5 working groups. It was established in May 2018. And the 5 working groups were focused on diplomatic relations, military to military coordination, intelligence cooperation, economy, and refugee issues. So refugees was one of the groups, and this high-level forum only met once. They were supposed to meet again in Kabul. So they met once in Islamabad. They were supposed to meet in Kabul next in December 2019, but they could not meet. There are challenges, as I said. It's not an easy ground to maneuver on. So there are challenges, and they're real. Both sides have very legit concerns, and so that's what my position is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dilawar.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. There was another question about Russia and China in Afghanistan, the role, of course, of these 2 countries. Maybe Francesca, you can add something about this issue.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for the question. That is a very good question, because actually Russia and China are, the big elephants in the room when we speak about the future of Afghanistan, especially in light of the withdrawal of international community, US and international troops from the country. They have different approaches led by different interests in the country. Speaking about Russia, Russia is, of course, looking at Afghanistan and the evolution of Afghanistan, but probably Russia also well remember history, and so it is quite, not so willing to approach Afghanistan again as happened in the past. So what does it mean? That Russian government nowadays is trying and is also succeeding in building up their own interlocutors and the network of trustee inside Afghanistan in the very Russian style. So from political actors and stakeholders to Taliban interlocutors as well, in order to have the brightest picture possible of the situation. But then it is difficult to think about coming back again of Russia as in the past, meaning that probably the Russian East interest in Afghanistan is very focused on a specific domain, meaning first of all, counterterrorism. For Russia, what happens in Afghanistan and the links between the Afghan, terrorist network, or terrorist environment, and the Central Asian one is a matter of national security and strategic priority, of course. So the counterterrorism is one of the pillars of Russian attention for Afghanistan. The second one is the fight against the drug trafficking. That is indeed a biggest problem for Afghanistan that originated in Afghanistan, is still probably the main financial resources for Taliban for supporting the networks. There are some, estimation that last year, just in 2020, Taliban was able to raise at around 450 or 60,000 euros from drug cultivation and trafficking. So it is indeed a problem, especially because the drugs from Afghanistan follows, some direction. The one is through towards Europe through the Caucasus, and again, this is a crucial area for Russian interest, and the other is through Asia. So these are security-related problems to which the Russian governments are really interested in engaging Afghan stakeholders, no matter what kind of stakeholders, in order to stop them or to control or to have an assessment on that. On the other side, there is China. China has probably a different approach than the Russia toward Afghanistan, even if more or less the interests are the same, meaning that the first one is absolutely security. You know better than me that Afghanistan and China share the Wakhan corridor, and how strategic is the Wakhan border corridor for China, and how much China is interested in understanding and in controlling, if possible, the situation in Afghanistan, meaning or in regards the relations between not just Taliban and insurgencies, but especially the Al-Qaeda network still present in Afghanistan, or the so-called jihadist network in Afghanistan, and the possible links that these realities have with some, radical members or radical groups of Chinese origin, Hui from the Hui ethnicity in the first place, and then Uyghurs. So these are very top priority for China. And then there is the project of the Belt and Road Initiative, we can call like that. Of course, Afghanistan is nowadays, still not fully involved in it, of course, for the security problem, but in Afghanistan after the crisis or post-crisis could be seen as China as one of the members to include in order to carry on, those who are the Chinese agenda's priorities, like showing that China can be a partner for the development, which kind of development then we can discuss, but then China can be the provider of the money and the financing and the also expertise for rebuilding the infrastructures in Afghanistan. We have to consider that in Afghanistan there are also mines, and China is indeed very interested also in raw materials, as we have seen for for the relations with Africa. So probably China will be eager to have also a political role as interlocutor for Afghanistan, because the stakes are, you know, long-term stakes, while Russia will be more focused, but rather than strategic engagement with all the stakeholders.
Thank you, Francesca. There are other questions about the role of Turkey in Afghanistan and maybe why not to foresee a role for the Afghan National Army in the security of the Kabul airport. Maybe Pierluigi, you can add something more on this point.
Yes, thank you, Gabriele. I can see that the issue of the Kabul airport is quite interesting for our attendees. So I see that there are several questions, so I will try to summarize in one remark. First of all, if a deal will be actually reached between Turkey, the US, NATO, and so on, Turkey will maintain a small presence, will probably maintain a small presence in the country just to continue to defend and protect the airport. At the moment, Turkey is in charge of such a task. Turkish troops are deployed around the Kabul airport in order to guarantee the security of the airport. And if the situation will remain so, Turkish, of course, will not completely substitute NATO troops in Afghanistan. I saw a question about the possibility that Turkey could bring lasting peace to Afghanistan. I don't think so, unfortunately. Bringing lasting peace to Afghanistan it's probably one of the most difficult and complex challenges at all in the world, and Turkey on its own will not be able to accomplish this. Of course, the overall security and protection of the country, the people, the institutions will be totally upon the Afghan National Security Forces once NATO troops will leave the country by September 11. So the Afghan National Army on the one hand and the Afghan National Police on the other hand. The Kabul airport is still a strategic infrastructure, not just for the country, but also for international actors as well. As I said before, the diplomatic personnel of all the international countries in Afghanistan are of course present in Kabul, and the United States especially are quite concerned about how many troops they will have to keep in the country just for the security of the embassy and of the airport, because it's important also not just to guarantee the security of the embassy as a building, but also the security of the move from the airport to the embassy and back from the embassy to the airport for diplomatic personnel. NATO is committed to continue to support Afghanistan in several ways. One of these ways is to continue to provide support for the protection of the airport. The other ways, as we have seen, are the financial support in general for the security forces, the civilian support in order to enhance the capacity building of the Afghan institutions. Safeguarding the Kabul airport is one of the ways in which NATO is trying to commit for the future. In this sense, Turkish troops could play a major role since they are already present there. They are already tasked within the current NATO framework to provide security for the airport. And this is one of the possible scenarios for the future, as we said before. The Turkish troops will remain there, and the US, on the other hand, will have to keep less troops in the country since the airport will be under Turkish responsibility, let's say. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierluigi. There is another interesting, very smart question I would like add. Yes, from one side, Francesca underlined the need of a NATO commitment to help Afghanistan, to support Afghan institution, maybe in some action against the Taliban. On the other side, how this NATO assistance could be fruitful from outside the country, even if after 20 years of presence on the ground, NATO did not succeed. Maybe we can start from this point. Yes, NATO didn't succeed in supporting Afghanistan, and maybe to gain to the last goals of the presence. So not only fighting against Al-Qaeda, but fighting against insurgents to give Afghan people a better life condition. However, we arrived to a point where the political price of the NATO mission in the country is not sustainable anymore, especially from the US side. So as we spoke before, the new answer for the stabilization of the country and of the region should be searched in the Afghan people. Of course, with the commitment and support of the international community. However, not just on and only on a security perspective, but on a real economic and social development. How the international community could support is the $1 million question of today. And maybe, of course, our meeting today cannot give all, or however, could not give the answer, but could be an example of how the dialogue between different parties could lead to a better understanding of the situation on the ground and better ideas of how supporting the Afghan people. On these remarks, I would like to thank again Ambassador Riyadh for this opportunity of discussion today and the Institute of Regional Studies. Of course, also Mr. Khan, Ms. AZAMI, that is not with us anymore. Of course, my colleagues Francesca and Pierluigi for their speech, and all of you that had the patience and time to listen to our discussion and to intervene. I hope that this could be the first of many occasions of dialogue, also thanks to the collaboration between C.E.Z.I on one side and IRS on the other side. And I would thank you again and hope you a good day and a good evening, and hope to see you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye. Thank you.